I got to get something for my nose.
Right as we go live, David decides he's going to go off camera and grab something for his nose. Now, I don't know if what he's grabbing for his nose came from, say, south of the border or Colombia, Peru, maybe.
I set myself up for that one.
You did, man, and I zeroed right in for the kill. And would you expect anything less from me?
I would have been disappointed.
Indeed, and I would have been disappointed I would have not slept tonight if I didn't go after you on that.
little obsessive.
So we've talked about a lot of things. I really kind of want to start out with the big news of the day, man. Let's just dig right into this because what I had presented to you today. David and I chat off. We chat actually regularly throughout the day when we're both supposed to be working. And then we actually, right. And then we end up working probably on odd hours to catch up with all the crap that we were supposed to do that we didn't because we were busy busting each other's balls. So one of the things that I had said was the word insurrection is being thrown around a lot. And I kept thinking, do I find this to be an accurate description of what is going on? Insurrection sounds to me like... I suppose in the technical sense, you could say that, sure. Mm-hmm. Based on what it is, the reasons that we were given by the people who were, the very small handful of people who pulled this shit, that it could be characterized that way. Where I'm coming at it, the end that I'm looking at it from is, it is actually a word that would benefit the opposition. So if the opposition could capitalize on the fact that everybody's pissed, including people who voted for this president, I'm not big on the whole generalization thing where it's like, 70 million people who voted for Trump supported this. They don't. So that, and we'll debate that too. We were supposed to actually kind of get into that statistic of how many Republicans support the quote insurrection or storming of the Capitol last week. That was a poll you brought up. And a couple of, when we did our live stream a couple nights ago, we were supposed to actually get into that, and we will.
I saw one today.
So was the methodology a little bit better?
I saw the headline. I didn't look into it. Vast majority of everybody is against it, including, I can't remember if it was an overwhelming majority of Republicans. It was pretty high.
Or against it,
not support, yeah.
So they probably asked the question a different way, and that was my contention when I looked at it.
The people, that other poll, those people answered the question that they were asked.
They did, and that's and this is where I don't know if a lot of people are aware of that. I'm sure you are. Polling companies are actually for hire. So I could go to them and say, hey, I want you to conduct a poll that provides these kinds of results. And they will go, okay, here are our packages. Mm-hmm. Here are the different ways that we can do that. How deeply do you want to go? What kind of specificity do you want? The deeper you go, the more specific, the more they cost. Because obviously the methodology has to be more sound and the depth and the breadth has to be wider and larger. So that being the case, that's what I was taking to task with it. So... we might as well actually start with that then, because they're both related. This is funders of the... this was one that I grabbed too. The funders of the insurrectionist GOP. Do you agree with that framing from the media that the GOP are insurrectionists?
Well, see, So there's many different lenses and ways to come at this. Now, if I am a capitalist and I'm trying to make money, I have to grab people's eyeballs. And because we don't have regulations that require fairness and objectivity, some people say we should bring back the fairness doctrine so that you get both sides of these questions. I get and don't expect anything different from capitalist news media enterprise.
Well, you know what's really interesting about that? Because I don't disagree with you. I recognize, of course, that that these news outlets are selling a product. And they also, in order to effectively sell their product, have to know who their consumers are. So they do a ton of market research and they figure out exactly what kind of words and triggers these people are going to respond to in order to consume the product that they're selling. And I also don't begrudge them that. When I go after the media, I go after them because I am frustrated that this is the way they're doing it, knowing full well what the outcomes are going to look like. You can't tell me that the mathematics that they use to figure out who their demographic is and how they're going to sell it to them also don't include how the people who consume it are going to respond.
Hey,
and I would also, what's that?
Marketers get paid a lot for that. People trying to feed their kids.
They certainly do. Now, this is the thing. If a network was introduced that says, we're going to simply report this stuff to you, we will actually, you're laughing. I'm going, you know what? I bet more people will actually tune in.
We used to have that.
I know we used to have that.
Yeah, it's been proven. And so it got overtaken by narrowcasting, right? And so I don't blame them. I blame us. Like you posted on the wake of that day.
That's what I was saying, man. Yep.
It's not them, it's us. And so as somebody myself who is extremely critical about what I read, who is clear that the headline is written by somebody else who wrote the story, and the two often have nothing to do with each other, I'm very good at separating the editorial content from the reportage, and it's kind of fine with me. I can look at any article by any outlet and kind of recognize their bias and kind of suss out the fact from the opinion, and take it for what it is, and then go find something on the other side, and then kind of build up and synthesize my own kind of point of view, because there's no outlet out there that's going to give it to me. I just don't. And so I take that as fair. That's not fair. There's not no outlet. It's harder.
It's harder to find one.
Yeah.
And you also might from time to time find something that's, hey, this is actually very reasonable. Yeah. The presentation is good. It doesn't sound like it's too one-sided. And look at this, David. We shop at the same store.
Nice stuff.
I believe we're both drinking exactly the same thing right now.
Same shitty,
including the same flavor. Look at that. Hey,
the scent of taste, as they call it. I think I saw a comedian go, "Oh yeah, they carried this thing to market in the. They had some berries in the back of the truck. That's how it got flavored."
Oh man. Anyway, so returning to what we were talking about.
Yeah.
What I find it's interesting with what we just said about the way I just this particular paper, this particular outlet says funders of the insurrectionist GOP want you to forget their role, and you brought up that's how capitalism, capitalists, people in business to make money off that kind of stuff, right? Present it. This is from the Daily Poster, who is a offshoot of the further left version of the Guardian. Okay. So these are people who decry capitalism on a regular basis, which I think is really funny.
Yeah.
So and that's why I wanted to bring it up, because again, I don't disagree with you on why this stuff takes place. So let's take a look at what Matt Taibbi has to say about this stuff. And again, this is his is more of an overarching point about how the Capitol insurrection, riots, protests, whatever you want to call it, we're framed.
Let me hold you, but I didn't answer your question.
Okay,
is that a fair characterization?
Yeah.
Let's see. If 70 million people, so from what I've seen, it's a crazy number. 80% of Republicans think the election was stolen. Okay, so if you think the election is stolen, maybe you have sympathy for an insurrection. Now, the poll I saw today said the overwhelming majority of Republicans do not support the violence. I think that's the word, or however they put it, the storming of the Capitol building. And so if that is the insurrectionist act, I would say no, the GOP is not the party of insurrection. I prefer the party of treason, but
I've noticed that as of late in your masterful trolling rhetoric.
But if I take off and I'm just completely objective, I'd say no, it's an inflammatory headline, but I'd say you got to get noticed in the marketplace.
Well, and so to that point, I'm familiar with the fairness doctrine, of course. Would you support a return of such a thing?
I don't know. I don't know enough about the pros and the cons. On its surface, it seems like a reasonable idea to contemplate, because if news outlets are required to provide both sides, then they will. And as soon as I say that, I think it's highly ineffective, because then it's all in the eye of the beholder how equitably you make both of those sides. And so I like the concept. I just don't know how practical it is.
Well, and I recall that in many years ago when when the concept was explained to me by somebody and I checked into it, that was one of the problems with it, is that a lot of what it is that, I mean, you could report, here's a fact, this number of people showed up to eat at this restaurant this day. It's really easy to quantify that. Now, why they're there, what it is that got them there. Why some people chose to sit near the door, why some people chose to sit in the middle of the restaurant, those things are subjective. We can guess at them. How accurate is that? Without taking a poll, we're going to now guess how they felt about the food. Well, this guy actually left a little early. These folks didn't leave a big enough tip. You know what I mean? This is the kind of thing that ends up this is how news to me is actually reported. For example, you have, people the pundits, the people who show up as a paid correspondent, not correspondents, but the pundits that show up to analysts, where somebody
paid political operatives,
analysts, where they show up and honestly, they are handed a tear sheet with the talking points on them, and they just kind of regurgitate that stuff. So I kept going, what the hell's the point of having them there then? I mean, if it's already been analyzed for them to just kind of go, okay, these are my notes, this is the shit I'm supposed to repeat, terrific. And then they do that, and then, and again, is it because they need to fill in the time? I mean, it used to be that when Walter Cronkite, for example, had somebody from the military on there to explain what was happening in Vietnam, it was because they needed clarification and expertise that wasn't available, that Walter Cronkite himself could not report.
Or maybe Walter Cronkite was just a propaganda arm for the U.S. military to be able to spread their lies to everybody, and there was no countervailing views available for people to hear. Because as I said to somebody, I'm like, we want to go back when the news was like, Walter Cronkite was lying to us too. So let's not, just because we had.
But he was not offering. He was not editorializing. He was given the information to report to us.
Yeah.
Right. And he had his own investigative reporters. Who was he with? He was with NBC, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure. I could be wrong.
I remember watching him every night, and that's the way it was.
And the thing about it, can you imagine though? And this is something I ask people who are old enough to remember them, and that makes us Jurassic, basically. Can you imagine him going on there and offering an editorialized opinion on a politician?
No,
he would be mortified.
They had standards back then.
That's right.
Right. So, news divisions used to be walled off. They were supposed to lose money.
They were supposed to lose money.
They were supposed to. Yeah, if news divisions were walled off from the revenue generating aspects of the networks, right?
Okay.
And so I can remember reading this, but I can't cite it. The news departments regularly lost money, and I think that was a point of pride. If you were a newsman, you weren't out there generating filthy lucre. You were
CBS
reporting the news, right? And so this kind of right now, you got to make money. News divisions have to be profitable, and then so they slant this news to be profitable. And it's just a different world we live in. It's much more competitive.
Well, let's take that, because this is something that I was reading. I don't know if our viewers / listeners are aware of who Matt Taibbi is. Matt Taibbi is he's an award-winning journalist, and one that he is a rock star. I find him to have a great deal of integrity, and he does actually have a great ethos when it comes to journalism. He is also self-identified as a progressive, somebody that we might consider to be left-wing or even far left-wing. But it doesn't really read that way when you read. He does editorialize too. But it seems to me that what he's doing is trying to present it fairly, by saying, look, here's all the stuff that I gathered. Here's a perspective that it looks, from here, this is what it looks like, rather than telling you that this is the way it is. So I think this is a good way for me to, let's look at that, because you're saying this is a different world. Standards are different. We have, the news works differently. Let's start here. He says, this is from 6 hours ago. This was today. The moment a group of people stormed the Capitol building last Wednesday, news companies began the process of sorting and commoditizing information that long ago became a standard in American media. Media firms work backwards. I have said this too, that they take a conclusion and work backwards from it to figure out how they're going to present it. They first ask, how does our target demographic want to understand what has just unfolded? Then they pick both words and the facts that they want to emphasize. It's why Fox News uses the term pro-Trump supporters, while New York and The Atlantic use insurrectionists. It is why conservative media today is stressing how Apple, Google, and Amazon shut down the, quote, free speech platform Parler over the weekend, and while mainstream outlets are emphasizing a new round of potentially armed protest reportedly planned for January 19th or 20th. I want to skip through. No, this is actually, I'm just going to keep reading it. I think that right down to where it's highlighted is where I want to stop. So what happened last Wednesday was the apotheosis of the Hate Incorporated era, when this audience first model became the primary means of communicating facts to the population. For 100 reasons dating back to the mid-'80s, from the advent of the internet to the development of the 24-hour news cycle to the end of the fairness doctrine and the Fox-led discovery that news can be sold as character-driven, episodic TV in the manner of soap operas. The concept of a just the facts newscast designed to be consumed by everyone died out. News companies now clean world events like whalers, using every part of the animal, funneling different facts to different consumers based on calculations about what will bring back the biggest engagement kick. The migrant caravan? Fox slices off comments from a Homeland Security official describing most of the border crossers as single adults coming for economic reasons. The New York Times counters by running a story about how the caravan was deployed as a political issue by a Trump White House staring at poor results in midterm elections. Repeat this info sifting process a few billion times, and this is how we became, as none other than Mitch McConnell put it last week, a country drifting apart in two separate tribes, with a separate set of facts and a separate realities, with nothing in common except our hostility towards one another and a mistrust for the few national institutions that we still share. That is, again, this is why I love Taibbi. I think all of that, he was so good at making this make sense. And this is also something, as you very well know, that I talk about regularly. We are given information that is designed to support our pre-existing biases. We are not, there isn't a great deal of effort being put in to provide us with information that is designed for us to ponder.
But it's all there. And so if you join those two sides that Taibbi talked about, both of those things are true at the same time. We just don't get that in our short form reporting now. This is why I rue the decline in newspapers, because I want to read a long story that has both sides in it and leaves it for me to kind of decide how I feel, which is classic reportage, right? I can remember the LA Times back in the day, on the front page every day used to have a long story. Mm-hmm. And I subscribed to the Times just so I could read this one long, deep piece. I can't remember if it was every day or every Saturday, whenever it ran, because it did a good job of kind of sussing out, both sides, 3 sides, 4, 5 sides of an issue. We live in such and so this is my perception. We live in such our attention spans have gotten so short. We live 140 characters, and we get a snippet, and we just keep running, and that's kind of it. And if you only listen to what you already agree with, that's kind of all you get. But all it takes is to listen to more of the stuff that you don't agree with than you do.
I recommend several things to people when it comes to this kind of thing. First, when you pick a book, also pick a second book by somebody and something that you disagree with to begin with, and read it. You know what I mean? For example, if I want to read, the Trump biography because I'm a big Trump fan. And by the way, I'm not. I think everybody already knows that. But for the sake of argument, then I also want to buy a book that from somebody I hate, Clinton, Hillary Clinton. We're gonna, that's what I'm talking about, is that kind of thing. And it is so incredibly instructive to do that. This is one of the main reasons that David has recommended that I read many things that I generally probably would not have considered reading. It has changed my world. It's very enlightening to do so. It has actually kind of built a bridge. And as I harp on around here all the time, this is what the Skeptic Tank is about. I don't want to drift too far off target here, because there is
a hot topic.
Some more of the overarching point here is that we have a group of people right now that are fleeing the Trump administration. His cabinet is. I mean, who just quit today? Department of Homeland Security had quit today, and we've got an inauguration coming up. No. We need the Department of Homeland Security to be cohesive, man. This is bad news, right? So we also have there was just a report that I saw that huge companies, corporate donors, private donors that generally would be giving to PACs for the GOP and related causes and politicians have decided that many of them have said we are going to stop doing this because we don't want to be associated with what's going on. I keep thinking, okay, and I can appreciate that, and I'd probably want to distance myself from some of this too if I was that deeply involved. At the same time, if we were actually getting honest reporting that it include, what did Matt Taibbi say right here? He said, Fox News uses the term pro-Trump supporters while the New York and the Atlantic use the word insurrectionists. If that wasn't the case, if we were actually getting some honest, objective reporting, would these people feel it was so necessary to flee? Would it be, would there be enough for the current power to capitalize on? And what I mean by that is they're drawing up articles of impeachment. Senate's going home, man. Nobody's going to impeach anybody. That's for show. That's that's what power does. So, and that was actually what I wanted to lead into the next section here with, is power is benefiting dramatically by this. Mm-hmm. So that being said, to all of those of you who are, staunch believers in what the president has said and what he's done, I'm not here to admonish any of you, but one of the things that I've got to say, I know you are, but I'm not. I've got to try and remain objective here, man. I've always called him like I saw him, and I can't stop doing that. So the point being is that people ask me, oh yeah, well, if there wasn't any cheating, how come Trump lost? And my answer is very simple: because Trump. That's it. That's the only reason you need. Yeah. Trump steps on his dick all the time, screws up the stuff that he's working on or has put so much effort into, to the point where, and I'm going to actually scroll down in this article. There's a great description of what I'm talking about right here. I would say, David, you're extremely well informed, and you do actually read a number of different things. Can you name 5 things off the top of your head that the president did that were good?
And so I asked you this the other night, what they were, and I can't. Now, here's something I saw the other day, and I was listening to, oh my God, listen to some crazy alt-right talk on Patriot Sirius, where all the crazy right-wing radio stuff is. And they said 2019, and I actually went and looked this up, the 2019 U.S. Census Bureau.
Yep, I was going to bring this
income
up.
And whatever that survey is, said that black income rose at a greater percentage than white income in 2019, which intrigued me. And so I went to dig through it to find out more about that statistic and kind of look back and put in some context, prior history, and all those other kinds. So I haven't had a chance to go through a deep dive, but it did appear that that was an accurate quote. And so, there's, I don't want to, but generally all incomes rose. And so is that good, bad? I need more context to understand that. On the face of it, it sounds good.
So then let's actually look at, rather than going, did black incomes rise at a faster rate than white? That is in there, but let's just take a look, pull back and look at the bigger picture. One of the things that we've been hearing from the left and from progressives for a long time is that that wages are not rising according to inflation. They've been stagnant. For the first time in I want to say it was 40 years, wages began rising at a rate faster than they had previously. I'm not going to say that they kept up with inflation because I don't know that for sure. However, incomes across the board, white, black, women, and Hispanics, the major demographics, all actually did go up. And for the very first time, the middle class, I want to say it was 10 years, previous 10 years, that the middle class actually had broken past the level of income that it was previous. So that is something that is, it's arguably the direct result of Trump's policies. Largely on some deregulation, on convincing some companies to bring their manufacturing back. If I remember right, it was the Clintons and the Bidens and the Obamas of the world and the supporters of such that were saying manufacturing is never coming back to this country. So I did some checking as well. There were 250,000 manufacturing jobs lost during the Obama administration, and there was more than 500,000 created during the 4 years of the Trump administration. So in this, how that works too, David. As a financial professional, that you bring a manufacturing concern back to a town that's been dying for God knows how many years, it changes everything. The property values go up. They have money to revitalize. Tax dollars start flowing into the local coffers. So that is one of those good things that he did. Are you aware that the president signed the very first bill to criminalize animal cruelty at the federal level?
I didn't know that, and I'm going to hold in abeyance my challenges to Trump's effect on bringing back the manufacturing, and I'm going to ask how much local tax giveaways did they give away, and whether this was a net positive. And I want to put that in the context, because all of this stuff happens on the platform of what happened before. I always say presidents are like quarterbacks. They get too much of the credit and too much of the blame.
Agreed.
Sometimes they're just there.
Well, this is why I made sure that I used the word the Trump administration rather than saying Trump himself. Personally, I don't know if he's got the chops to know exactly how to do any of that. I really don't know. But what I can say is that based on the census data that you just referred to, we actually have a foundation to say, yeah, these things did change under that administration. Now, if we're going to hold an administration or a president responsible for something done on his watch, couldn't we also give him credit for something that's good done on his watch regardless? I think it's kind of the same, if we're going to, we need to hold each other, we need to hold our principles they should be amorphous. It shouldn't be, I'm going to say this guy sucked because I don't like him, even though he did stuff that I do like, which is what we see a lot of. Anyway,
so some of that's a trade-off. It's like how much of a budget, running a budget deficit is stimulative to the economy. And so if you want to, run massive budget deficits, whether it's by cutting back taxes and keeping spending the same, or whether it's by, raising spending and raising, if you just want to increase that gap, whichever kind of way you want to get to it, it will stimulate the economy. And you push the bill, you push the due, when the bill comes due down the road. But I guess maybe if we're talking about modern monetary theory, maybe the bill never comes through.
Maybe we never pay it. Yeah, or we pay it in Bitcoin. So it's interesting that you bring that up too, because we also see, depending on who's in power, and I'm just talking about the way people generally react to this kind of stuff, is that it's really funny to watch them say Obama didn't run this budget deficit, and I'm like, yeah, no, he didn't, but he ran up the freaking debt. So there is a difference between debt and deficit. And again, I personally don't even have an issue with Obama. I think he actually did a terrific job of bailing us out, of the mess that he got in, that he had to inherit. I don't agree with a number of his policies. I'm not a big fan of the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, in which he actually authorized the indefinite detainer of anyone that the administration considered to be a terrorist, with very ambiguous language, indefinitely, with no due process. I'm not a fan of that. They also reauthorized the Patriot Act. What kind of shit was that? He was saying he wasn't going to do it. Now, if I know anything about how the power structure there works, I believe that man went into office with those ideas in mind. And then he was sat down and said, look, Mr. President, here's the reality. You can't do these things, and here's why. And he went, shit, okay. So how do we actually clean this up then? You know what I mean? And that's what happened. I want to say that's likely what happens to all of them. Trump, when we can't do that, huh? Bullshit. You know what I mean? That's at least my perception. I don't know that either one of those things happened. What I'm saying is that, there's a whole number of reasons that people don't like Trump, which are fairly obvious. But at the same time, I want to say that watching him push power around was one of those things I kept going, man, they're going to push you back, They're going to push you back.
We're seeing it.
Yeah, and we've been watching it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't.
But it's kind of funny to me watching Trump push. Trump is power. Trump is the most.
Well,
powerful.
you would think so, but I don't think so. And I've said this a number of times, and that is that any president is a temporary politician. And as we've seen, they are far more temporary than the people who actually do hold the power of the purse. Those folks have been there for the last, Nancy Pelosi's been there since, kind of since the ice melted. You know what I'm saying?
Been there a long time, yeah.
Biden's been there forever. And that being, so it's funny because the argument for that is, well, they know how Washington politics works. Well, maybe it wouldn't need somebody who knows how all the corrupt bullshit works in order to give us a product if we pulled them out of there every 4 to 6 years instead of letting them stay.
The counter argument is if you pull them out, you give more power to the deep state. The aides and the advisors and the lobbyists, they become the historical repositories of information that then the politicians have to rely on, because by the time they get up to speed on how it all works, they're termed out.
Well, and this is actually, that's a great point. I had not considered that. And I have actually, it's funny, the deep state is one of those trigger words.
Generally, I would never use a trigger word.
Oh, no, of course you wouldn't. No, not you. You are not an agent provocateur.
Never. Only
never.
Vocally.
So that's actually a really good point, though, because I remember, I don't know how you feel about him. I can't listen to Hannity talk for more than 2 seconds.
I was listening to him this afternoon.
I'm just not a fan. I think he's a very, very smart man, an incredible entertainer. He's built himself. Incredible entertainer. Yeah, he's an entertainer, man, and he's great at it. And I don't think he's stupid by any means. Yeah. I think he's wrong a lot. But I also, the rushes for his show are like, tonight on Hannity, new bombshell blown open, the deep state exposed, blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, why do people fall for that crap? Why don't they go, wow, that's how this guy is worth $100 million. That's what it is. It's not about him informing you of something. It's about, hey, this is why he's worth $100 million, because he's really good at this.
Dude, I came to that realization back in the 90s when I used to listen to Rush, and my head would explode. I listen to this dude, my head, I would be like, oh my God, and then I just, my blood pressure was just not. Then I realized one day, because it's funny. I realized one day this is entertainment. If I think about this as entertainment instead of information, it'll depersonalize it for me, and I'm not taking this all personally anymore. This dude is funny. He's good at what he does.
He's great at what he does.
Yeah, and
he actually pioneered it. He created conservative news outlets, man. He's the master.
Radio, right, and so I can listen to. I'm sitting there listening to these. My wife's like, listen to those crazy people again. I can't stand it. I'm like, they got good jokes. I think it's full of crap. I'm like, this is ridiculous stuff. But I'm just trying to hear how other people are framing it, and we're realizing that from my point of view, this is BS. But I need to hear how it's being framed, so I can understand how other people are being pushed. And then I come on social media and I hear all the same catch.
Yeah, it just regurgitated.
Yeah.
So this again is one of those things where social media to me it represents the very best and the very worst in tools for communication. Yeah. And it's funny because every time I want to say something extreme about it, my brain goes, history too well. How power responded to the advent of a portable printing press. How power responded to typewriters being available to the general public. This isn't new. How. So don't have that same response is what I'm telling myself in my mind about social media. Because here's one of the things that I think is really interesting. We talked a little bit about corporate news media. We've been talking about it since we started. YouTube has offered a platform very similar to this one for people much like us to go, look, we don't buy any of this crap. So we're going to do this to present our own way that we see the world and the way we see it. Really powerful, amazing stuff. Are you familiar with Tim Pool? Have you ever watched Tim? He was actually a Occupy Wall Streeter that was one of the very first to use his iPhone to begin capturing what was happening on video and then actually posting it to his social media pages. He then got involved. He was actually one of the, I want to say he was one of the founding members of Vox. I'm pretty sure it was Vox, not The Guardian. He worked very closely. What he was working on with Vox was, I want to say it was investigative reporting, on the ground kind of reporting. They didn't have that going on at the time. He actually was there in Tahrir Square during the Arab Spring uprisings in Egypt. He went to Venezuela. You know, he's been around, and I want to say he's 35, so he's a young guy, and he's actually, I want to say he's got well over 1 million YouTube subscribers, which monthly he has more people viewing his stuff than all of CNN and Fox News combined.
Wow.
Yeah, and he's just, it's not a slick production. It's not, he's just him and a camera like this. And he's really very, very good at being as objective as he can be. Over the last couple of years, he was, when I found him, he was a Bernie bro. And he felt that Bernie and the Democrats in general had kind of betrayed him. He was watching the dirty tricks, the tactics, and I'm surprised that you didn't notice this before, Mr. Investigative Reporter. The dirty tricks and the tactics have always been there. It's just I think you're noticing them now, and they have run counter to some of the things that you held very important, that you thought that they represented these things. So as of late, he is very critical of the Democrats and very critical of the news media, which makes people think he's right-wing, and he's far from it. He was a Bernie guy. Then he really fell in love with Tulsi Gabbard. He wanted Tulsi, but he was debating between Tulsi and Andrew Yang. He really liked the idea of a universal basic income for a while. And then, as he watched the Democrat debates played out, he kind of changed his mind. This is a guy I think is pretty objective. The reason, again, I go on like this is because social media can be used to spread all kinds of garbage. And it can also be used for reasonable discussion. It could be used for enlightenment and information. So what we're seeing right now looks to me, Parler was shut down last night. And if we were to take Matt Taibbi's descriptions, you'd have people calling Parler right-wing social media, right? When it's not, and it wasn't designed that way. But, you have these people framing it that way. This is where white supremacists go. It's white supremacist social media. No, it's not. It's just social media that unless you're threatening somebody's life, they're not going to shut down what you're saying. So,
well, let me push back on a couple of those things.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll start with first on, movement for Black Lives, back when it was Black Lives Matter, was getting information through Twitter. And I think Ferguson really started a lot of that stuff, because you weren't getting the filter through, news media. You had access through Twitter, video clips. You're seeing people on the ground or video and stuff. And then you get, there was a couple people who came out of that with followings, and you get, 5 or 6 different people who are giving you, real life video. And you watch enough of those, you kind of figure out what's going on. And this citizen journalism is a big part of information for on the ground activists and protesters. Parler. And so Parler, and what little I know about it, is that they announced that they were coming back up at the end of the week, and the guy that was on Fox News here when they come back at the end of the week is an investor, and he's a Fox News personality. And from what else I know is that the CEO, he seems to be, Fox is his outlet, because while it wasn't founded, and I don't know if it wasn't, certainly the right gravitated to it. At some point, the right guy was like, get out of Facebook, let's go to Parler. And I do believe, and I have a lot of facts, is that, Parler, it was a haven for Trumpians and other assorted...
Republicans. I don't know if I've ever heard anybody use that term, but that's pretty good.
And other assorted elements of the right wing. And so apparently there were some real foul things going on over there. This program of... and I tried to post a video, but I guess it was taken down, was kind of trying to rally people to come to Washington and tear stuff up. That's how they posted it. Now, I think you have to be clear and careful to say that's not the only thing that was over there. But AWS's statement was that we closed Parler down for a violation of terms of service. They did not have a practice and a policy in place to regulate what people were saying, and there were too many calls to violence for AWS.
Right, and let me push back a little bit on that. Last year, 2 years ago, I did a video about cancel culture. I think I told you the other night, I used to do, fully produced videos where I was, discussing stuff like this on my own. And what I found was a Twitter user that collected all of the hateful comments made by blue check verified Twitter users, not just hateful, but ones that also called called for violence, incited violence, called for rape, murder, et cetera, et cetera. And he collected all of these things. There are thousands, if not tens of thousands of them. And I made a nice little video montage of all of these people talking about how we need to kill these white people, we need to rape these women, I hope this president gets his head blown off, yada, 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 yada. As well as people saying, let us get together and figure out how to blow this up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's lots of it. So I understand what you're saying. I did hear also that there was the problem with that AWS had. Amazon Web Services, by the way, everybody is AWS. And that was who the hosting company for Parler was, or is, depending on how you look at it. They're supposed to have something in place when you make a public platform like that. If you're going to lease servers from Amazon Web Services, they have some rules. There's a contract. And in that contract, one of the things that you're not allowed to do is provide a platform for child pornography, is a good example. They wouldn't tolerate that. That's not, again, I'm not saying that's free speech. In fact, I know it's not. We can push back against that quite easily. Children don't have agency. So, but the point being is that there are things that could be considered a violation of a contract like that. And AWS, I know what their contracts say, as many of my clients, actually, we host their stuff on AWS servers. So that is something that I am familiar with. At the same time, it seemed a little ambiguous when you read the statement by AWS and listened to what the CEO of Parler had to say. He was actually saying that we do have terms of service in place. We have never tolerated calls for violence or insurrection or anything else on our platform. We have removed and shut down accounts, and he gave a number of examples. So the way I see it is that the way I see this playing out is that Parler has evidently gone to sue AWS because and frankly, one of the things that's in the terms of service for Amazon Web Services and their hosting is that they generally will provide you with a warning. Now, the language is fairly ambiguous. Mm-hmm. They don't have to. Mm-hmm. So I want to say that what we're seeing here is the same kind of thing. You had mentioned today that Facebook has banned the pages and the hashtag, what was it? Stop the steal. Stop the steal.
Yeah.
So my question is why? Why would that bother anybody? Stop the steal. Let these people burn themselves out. They will.
January 6th. I think that might have done it. And so
did it?
Brent made this point pre-1/6, post-1/6. The world is different, right? So because and I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead, because this is the meat of this dang thing. This man, with this craziness around these election results, this demagogue had so inflamed people that they breached the Capitol building.
Some of them did, sure.
I know some of them did. I know you get. But a whole bunch of people don't. This is different. You go run up in a Capitol. This is different. This has not happened before. This is the comparable to nothing that has happened.
Again, so what you're arguing though is 1 degree. It's the Capitol building. That's never happened. Okay, terrific. I get that. But at the same time, Washington has literally protests every single day of the month all year. It's not new. None of them have done that. And again, we can actually argue the merits, or the demerits, if you will, of that particular incident. And I don't know that anybody outside of a very small group of fringe weirdos actually supports it to begin with.
It doesn't matter who. See, you've got to think for me. It doesn't matter who supports it. It happened, and so it's funny. It's like you said. It's all fun and games until the noose comes out.
Well, okay, I did say that too, didn't I? Did you notice they freaking took it down?
No.
My comment was deleted. I did not delete it.
No way.
Oh, my comment was deleted, dude.
I'm sure it was that image. They take the image down.
No, the image is still there. What I said was taken down.
That's weird.
Well, I'm sure you're aware that we're streaming right now on my YouTube channel because Facebook has blocked me, and they haven't said why. I've got no email. I have no messages. I've checked my junk mail. There's nothing. I figure the ban will play itself out, and then I'll be able to go back to doing it. But how generally I'm very careful. We will say provocative things, but not not truly offensive stuff. I won't tolerate it. That's not what my page is about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think the group of people that participate are aware of that too. So what the hell why did they do it? So some of this is done by AI, based on algorithms. It searches for stuff. And there was an image there. Maybe my comment was actually erased because the algorithm put the two things together, right? Yeah. But again, not to get too far off track, the point I wanted to say to you that, yes, the Capitol building was breached. And we can say, yes, this is unprecedented. This is a big deal. Also, I can't remember the last time we had a president that would have even unintentionally incited something like that because of the reckless way he talks to begin with. Yep. And this is the way, when I look at it as objectively as I can, I'm dispassionate about the guy. He doesn't really carry an emotional charge for me either way. So I'm listening to the way he's talking, going, do you realize, Mr. President, that there's plenty of morons in the world that will take what you're saying right now as some sort of call to arms? There are a small number of them, but even a small number of them is enough to cause this kind of problem. So, and it's not like, the leader of Antifa or BLM or any of the other arguments that I've heard. They're not the president.
Exactly. I don't think those movements have leaders. You keep going.
Well, yeah, actually BLM does. And Antifas are pretty well hidden. We talked the other night. We talked. Well, we have the two women. One of which was saying that she, as a leader of BLM, is a quote trained Marxist, and then she went and doubled down on saying that stuff.
Alicia Garza, who's from Oakland, and I forgot.
I think that was her, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think it was her that said, but they don't lead anything. They founded the organization at one point, but they have intentionally founded it as cells. Is like we don't have here. I don't know because there was this big controversy at the beginning. It's like, well, what's your prescription? Like, we don't have a prescription. It's y'all figure it out. We just put them up with this mantra. They built
to get people to get talking about it, be provocative, get things going.
They built no organization. They came up with no platform, and they were like, we intentionally are not trying to create a national organization because every time it's happened in the past, the government has figured out how to shut it down and fracture it, and so we're just saying this, and then whatever y'all do is cool. And so it's kind of really weird is that you've got these founders of this organization. There's a national BLM organization, but there's no connection with any kind of local group. So for example, there's no BLM group in Oakland. There's nobody claiming BLM in Oakland. Yeah, you get all kinds of
Which is funny because you do have Antifa who says we're Antifa, Kenosha, we're Antifa.
No, I've never seen anybody here say they were Antifa. We got anarchists. We got black.
No, I don't necessarily mean here. I'm saying that like if you go to Twitter or even Facebook, it'll be like Antifa Miami, Antifa Portland. You know what I mean? So they do actually have kind of a loose way of like I said the other night though, they're great at hiding just about everything about themselves.
And I'm going to say that's black and not Antifa.
That actually is something I have in my notes to go read more about. Your description was awesome. You're saying that these are provocateurs. These are people who are out there to incite. And my question the other night was kind of, we ended up getting sidetracked as we're going to here in a minute. Yeah. But that was, is that actually a group that's, is that CIA? Anyway.
That's right.
Right. It is. They're pretty good at it too. So anyway, man, I totally lost I lost control of the conversation right here. the point being is that the president is not those folks. This is the president of the country who's supposed to, whether or not you elected the guy, you voted for him, he represents you anyway. He represents the interests that you are involved with the country. I mean, directly, your representatives in Congress are the people who represent you. But the president is supposed to have, it's supposed to be cohesive. Not, it's us against them. This is one of the worst things about the guy. Because like I said, we started 20 minutes ago about talking about, name 5 good things that he's done. We came up with a couple. I could probably name 10 more. But the point being is that stuff is likely to be lost to time and history based on his conduct.
Yeah.
And this is why I said, why did Trump lose? Because Trump.
Because Trump, and also because Stacey Abrams kicked his butt on the ground and signed up a whole bunch of new voters.
She did a great job.
A bunch of years just with the ground game. And so, his enduring legacy is going to be the images of what happened last week.
That's right. Anything that you see with Trump in a book written in 5 years is going to start with a picture of something burning in the Capitol, or of that one dickhead that was, oh my God, that was actually walking out with the podium under his arm. God. So
it got a lot. There's a lot of good imagery to take.
And I got to tell you right now, a dear friend of mine, somebody who I when I did radio a number of years ago, he ran the radio station I worked for. He is like deep in the conspiracy stuff on this. Yep. I've been arguing with him daily because to me, I like him. He's a decent guy. He's a hardworking, good American boy. And every day he's like, look, this is going to happen tonight. Trump's going to sign, the Insurrection Act orders at 7:45, and you just watch. And then I go, okay, 7:45's come and gone. What happened? How are you going to move the goalposts today? Because, dude, you've got a different excuse every day that this doesn't play out. Oh, well, now the Supreme Court's in play. I'm like, no, they're not. They actually already said they don't want to hear any of this. Well, Sidney Powell filed new lawsuits today. Have they agreed to hear her case? Well, not yet. But they will. You just watch it. I'm like, dude, let it, I don't want to say let go of this. If people really do believe that the election was dirty, and this actually is a good segue into something I wanted to talk about, is that we have two groups of people. You and I talked about this briefly before we went on air. You're still pushing back. It wasn't dirty. It was clean. It was clean. I'm going, I've seen enough evidence to where I'm asking the right questions anyway. So why wouldn't we simply say, maybe they actually have seen something that I don't agree with. But why should we tell them that they're stupid, that they're morons, they're wrong, they're destroying the country, they're boobs, they're idiots? Why would we do that? Simply because my own particular opinion is no, that didn't happen. Why can't we let them have that opinion? What's wrong with it?
Because you end up with people storming the Capitol.
You do if you tell them that they're wrong. You do if you tell them you're not going to listen to them. No.
Not buying that.
You silence people, what do? They find
dude.
other people like them, and you know this, man. You know this. This is in your history. You know it.
This is a complete. See, but I'm based on facts, things that actually happened, and so these people.
That's up for debate, isn't it?
Not at all.
Oh, no, it totally is.
It's historically documented fact. This happened 2 weeks ago. There hasn't been a chance and a case to look into it. And so when you start out,
Troy's here. I'm going to let him in. Keep going.
The man started lying before he got elected, right? Yep. So he already set a base and a precedent for most people to not believe him. Secondly, before he got elected the first time, he said, if I don't get elected, it's only because they stole the election from me. Oh, so if you tell me before the election that only way you're going to lose if they stole it from me, I'm not surprised. And then when after the election you lose, you start crying that they stole it. It just does not set you up to be believed. And then when you have 81 cases in court that are examined by judges and are thrown out for lack of merit, and when I hear Andy from Breitbart Radio listening, asking his callers, and so I'm listening to Breitbart Radio, and I think this dude's name is Andy, the one that's running now. Then Breitbart, Andrew was
Andrew Breitbart was the guy. He died.
But the guy that's running it on the radio now, people are calling up, going, they stole the election, and Andy's going, you got any proof? And they go, well, I got allegations. He goes, no, do you have proof? Well, this is what the suitcase. He goes, those aren't suitcases. They investigated that. And so this Breitbart dude is rebutting these people. He's going, look, let it go. He says, I've asked people to send me 10, there's thousands of allegations. I've asked them to send me 10 pieces of proof, and I can't get one. Now, if I get the Breitbart dude saying it wasn't a fraud, I'm kind of, and once that guy's convinced, y'all all should be convinced, because it's a self-serving argument. And I know you're coming with the data. If Giuliani and Trump and Kraken Lady and all the other kooks didn't pick up on this data stuff, if they're not even interested, that's another nail in the coffin.
I'm going to let you take this one, Troy. You have a lot of information about this. You did a lot of work on this. So why don't give us your push David down on this one, man.
Come on.
I was trying to remember what I was shaking my head about, and I finally remembered now, because he started saying, however many judges looked at this. I think I heard 61, not 81, but anyways, that's not the case. Very few of those were any evidentiary hearings. They filed suit. The briefs were read. The judges either said, "You're not a party. You don't have the standing to file this suit. You should have filed it earlier." Now
I love that one. That was one of my favorites. Oh, you mean the whole thing could have been rigged? Well, you should have filed it, 2 weeks ago. So we're not going to listen to it. But if those are the rules, those are the rules. I get that.
Yeah, I see one of my local DJs, and he doesn't like Trump. So he was saying, he was making this same argument that all these judges looked at this and you should have filed before the election. It's like, dude, all this stuff that was going on before the election. The Trump team joined the lawsuit here in Pennsylvania over it ended up that the mail-in ballots were allowed to be received past the election night. And
this was a rule that was created after mail-in ballots started coming in. Is that right?
And the Trump campaign joined that in July, and that decision was made about like 11 days before the election. So I mean, that's pretty disingenuous to say, well, you should have sued before the election. It's like, this was all pending before the election, and the court decided we're going to change a whole bunch of rules within a month of the election.
Well, it was kind of disingenuous to use the Postmaster General of the United States to rip out postal sorting machines in an attempt to delay.
Wait a minute.
I did some pipeline.
I did some investigation into this.
Yeah.
This was actually a program started under the Obama administration in 2012. What they were looking to do was modernize and streamline. So they began pulling out machines that were actually reported. Now, the Postmaster General doesn't even have the power to do it by himself. It actually has to go through the entire committee, which was a bipartisan committee. And the information that they got was going to the local postmasters and saying, what machines do you have that are no longer being used? Do you have some that are out, that we could take out of service? We're going to replace and modernize them. This started a long time ago. And this was something that the Postmaster General himself testified to when they brought him in and raked him over the coals. I watched that entire hearing, and I was actually quite impressed with his answers. Now, there was a few things about it that were a little, but I don't know enough about it for a real solid opinion. I'm also not necessarily defending the whole thing, but I can show factually that this program started 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago. So to blame it on him, what he did when he came in is went, how come this program is so slow? How come we haven't actually finished this up?
Well, and he waited until the summer before the election when he started answering those questions. It seems self-serving enough that SCOTUS was like, "Yeah, you don't do this now."
And again, fair enough. I'm not going to say that that it is impossible that there wasn't some nefarious intent. It just seems kind of, why would there be? What would the outcome be? Pulling sorting machines is going to have an effect on the election when they just started talking about doing it mostly by mail in March. When they dragged him in front of this committee, it was only a couple of months later. Again, it's like, okay, when you look at the timeline, let's just use, a standard of reason. is it logical that he went, oh crap, you know what? Soon they're going to start talking about mail-in voting. Let's actually go rig the whole thing by pulling out machines so it slows the whole process down. You know, frankly, I would have found easier. There would have been way easier ways to do it. Again, I'm a, you know, one of my favorite things to do is the hacking war games, man. I'm a network security professional. I would have said, hey, man, there's way easier ways to do this. Let's find a ballot counter that's got a drug problem and dangle some meth.
Except the problem was his chief of data security was impartial, right? He got fired.
Actually, that's not why he was fired. Let me tell you.
I didn't know why he was fired. But let me push back on Pennsylvania. So I saw Giuliani in Pennsylvania going, this is not a fraud case.
It was a procedure case.
Oh, shut up.
Well, no, you're right. Man, see, you're trying to sink the whole ship, and then I sink yours, and you're like, oh no, you did not.
I know.
Procedure is very important, and as you know, the way the law works, it's a combination of different things, and procedure is one of the most important.
My headline is better.
No,
I actually read these briefs. I read a lot of them.
He did.
So I kind of know what was going on there. Matter of fact, I probably missed more that was televised
because you spent all this time reading the briefs.
Yeah,
man, I started reading some of that stuff, and I was going, "Oh, good Lord." You know, the legalese is thick to begin with. So, and that's why I defer to you, Troy. You did a lot of hard work. You actually went out and marched on this thing, if I'm not mistaken. Did you not?
No, that was for the lockdowns.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, cool.
Yeah, you were fired the other day I was watching you.
Which was cool. Yeah, he got all wound up. And again, you got to give the guy respect. Yeah, this is how I started our conversation by saying, why do we have to disavow these people of what it is that they think based on what they've seen? You know, first of all, it's real easy to chalk it up to flat partisanship. You know, for example, we had somebody today, I had it in my notes and my battery just died, was talking about how 70 million people are racists and morons. And I'm like, that's so incredibly, that's a non sequitur. You can't even start with something like that. First of all, you don't know. Want to poll them all? You want to talk to all 70
million? Why do we round down to the tens on that? Because when I hear Rush Limbaugh say it's almost 75 million people, and when I hear somebody that doesn't like Republicans,
they say
like
70
million.
So in any case, that's what I'm saying here is that Troy, for example, I don't think is stupid. He's not a redneck. You know, it has nothing to do with any of that. He saw something that made sense to him enough for him to spend time reading legal briefs. Who fucking does that? Morons? Hillbillies? No, I don't think so. So why can't we just say, you know what, man, we didn't see what you saw. You know, and I have and I haven't, Troy. Some of it makes sense to me, some of it doesn't. What did make sense to me is when I watched the Data Integrity Project make their presentation, because the techniques that they used in analyzing the real-time data stream was the exact same stuff that I use when we were tracking down bank fraud. Because hackers are so good that what we have to do is use AI to find anomalous patterns, ones that are essentially outside of any sort of normal secured communications from a bank customer, for example. They look the same every single time. Genuine votes look the same every single time. So I told David that day when I saw the hearing, it was in front of the Georgia Senate subcommittee on the investigating the potential for voter fraud here. And the Data Integrity Project made the data and their methodology, all of their papers, available. So I went and downloaded it all, and we started going through it over here. And I found similar things. I'm a security specialist and a security analyst. So I actually sent what I found off to a friend of mine who is a data scientist. And he actually emailed me back and said, there is, everything that these people said, I find the exact same thing and more, was the email he said and sent to me. And then he said, I'll get back to you later. The point being is, isn't that enough for us to be concerned? Rather than just pushing back odds with bullshit, the guy's a demagogue. Now, like you said, David, he started out this entire thing by being full of shit. So it makes anybody who's already predisposed to being offended by that kind of thing to say, I don't believe a word he says. And you know what? Who else knows that? Power does. His political opposites in power know that too. If I were them, I'd be going, let's take this, twist it, bend it. We know this group of people is going to react badly. Let's actually have our press people write press releases that say stuff like unfounded. Trump again is repeating his unfounded claims of, why don't you just say Trump again has brought another lawsuit based on this information? Well, because it doesn't suit you.
Because he has a track record. So I go back to, everything that we need to know we learned in kindergarten. And we all heard the story of Chicken Little and the sky is falling when we were kids. And so if you run around and you release the Kraken and you get kicked and laughed out of every jurisdiction across the country because you're coming up with all this ridiculous stuff, then don't be surprised if people don't take your allegations seriously when they may have some merit. You have made your bed and you shall lie.
Like I said, he lost because Trump. I get that. But at the same time, as an American and a voter, I don't vote for presidents, but I most certainly vote. Voting for presidents is just stupid. We really should have just left it up to leave it up to the parties to deal with it. But as when I'm looking at this stuff going, there is something there. There's something to be concerned about. Do I believe that there's some grand conspiracy? No. Because it would be way too easy to uncover something of that magnitude. It would be. Now, based on what I saw, what I started talking to David about earlier, Troy, is you remember in the beginning, right in the beginning, mid-November, it was reported to the people of the world that the U.S. security infrastructure had been hacked. That it had been, they identified Russian hackers. Trump said it was Chinese. Frankly, I know who the players are in this game. And yes, there are Chinese hackers. This isn't their style. That's not what they're interested in, but it's entirely possible. So that being said, I've seen this stuff play out. This hack was huge. Because of the stuff around the election, it was also just underplayed. The new media did not give it nearly as much airtime as they would have if there wasn't so much controversy going on with Trump. So what a lot of people missed is that these hackers were able to infiltrate White House communications. They were able to infiltrate the Department of Homeland Security. They were, and I happen to know a bit about the tools that they were talking about that were compromised. The FireEye systems and the SolarWinds network management systems are used in pretty much everything. So Microsoft 365 Azure services were also compromised. And they're bulletproof. That doesn't happen. So that being the case, doesn't it stand to reason that if 4 years ago Russians were involved in influencing the outcome of our elections, and in 2020 Russians were caught hacking into our systems, that rather than it being some local actors or the Biden team or Democrats or any number of the dumb things that I hear coming from the right on this, why couldn't it have actually been Russian operatives that compromised these machines and these data streams?
I don't see a reason why not, but
neither does David, but he wants to push back anyway.
Why not the shape-shifting lizards that run the world? There's no proof. Serve up the body.
There is evidence, and that evidence should be considered.
There's allegations, and so it's not proven. And so, what are the alternative explanations?
Evidence is what leads to proof, sir. As you well know, where there's evidence, so we should be looking at.
What are the alternate explanations that could also account for what you saw? And so, I saw something in, I think it was
I've actually looked at a number of those things.
There was a decrement in the count, and they found out it's user error, and it was nothing wrong. And so, and then the other thing I go to is, why hasn't Trump taken up the mantle on this? He's taken up every other crazy idea, to try and say that something went wrong. Oh, there's suitcases under the table. That's probably the biggest reason why nobody believes.
But there were.
But there were.
And so that's been investigated. Right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't what they thought it was, but there were suitcases under the table.
It was just the ballots, and so it was
the ballots being counted without, not under the law, but without observers, without the officials that are supposed to be there.
Well, why the observers go home?
Because they were
told to go home.
They were told to go home.
That's actually on video.
We're done counting for the night.
Well, apparently,
then they pulled the bins out from underneath the tables and started counting again.
Well, apparently the Georgia election official, the other one that Trump called and leaned on, that's going to get himself in trouble. And, he repudiated all this, and every reputable outlet I've seen has said, this has been investigated, and here's what
it's all right on camera. They were there for over an hour without the person from the state elections that's supposed to be there. They were there without being open to the public because they sent the press home, without being available to observers because they had sent the observers home. So there's about 2 hours there. They were running ballots through machines, and it's not legal under Georgia law.
Well, the Georgia elections officials who are responsible for this disagree with you.
Well, of course they do. Well, and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that I know you watched the video that I sent you. And in that, we had one of those election officials saying that we've counted 113,000, give or take, ballots, and 106,000 of them had to be adjudicated, which is like way outside of the norms. So let's say it's even within the norms. Adjudicated means that essentially the paper ballot is then examined by a person. That person says there is a
digital image of the paper ballot.
And that's next. Actually, they still have the paper ones. This is something David keeps saying. Well, they recounted the paper ones. No, they didn't, because they didn't have them anymore. So when you make a digital image, when the person adjudicating this ballot goes, this is what the voter intended. There was a mistake here. We've been able to correct it. Now what we're going to do is take a digital image of that and then shred the original ballot. So we've recounted them by hand. No, they didn't, because they didn't exist to recount before they were put into the digital system again. Now, I have the owner's manual for the voting software, and I went through it. One of the options that's in it stuck out to me as very interesting, and that is that anybody with access to the machine can change the vote, delete the vote, remove the vote, alter the vote, rather than it being locked down under a protocol that says only an administrator can override and make this happen. So when you look at, what was sent to the Georgia Secretary of State, at least this is what is alleged, this is what is in the information, this is what the testimony said, was that what they were being given was a split. Data was split between two different places. What ended up there was the pre-altered count. So the pre-altered count ended up in one place. Then the altered count ended up in the hands of the Secretary of State. So when they went back to verify it by recounting, they had already been changed, and what they had was images of the ballots to verify them against after they had been adjudicated. That is what stuck out to me. I'm looking at this going, and I can see it. Here are the date and time stamps. You can look at a data stream, in real time. We use a couple of different tools for that. And one of the ones that I use, the program was written in C, so we use this Python decompiler to look at the data stream. We can see at points where the Secretary of State's office got the altered data, and what was coming through in the real-time stream. You could see where it was stopped, changed, and then re-uploaded. It's not hard to see it. It doesn't, I sent it off to James to have a look at it because I wanted to be sure I was seeing what I was seeing, because it was so goddamn easy. Remember I said that to you that day, David. I was like, what bothers me the most about this is that this wasn't hard. There wasn't any real challenge in doing it.
Yeah, he said that to me too.
So the Republicans did all this stuff to monkey up this vote, and they still couldn't come up with enough votes.
I didn't say that the Republicans did it. I didn't say that.
No, I did. That's what I'm saying. And so the Republicans had all this access and ability to to gummy up the vote and cheat like they did in 2016. But this time there were just too many real ballots for them to overcome, even with Republican fraud. And since you've got Republican Georgia Secretary of State, you've got Republican Georgia investigators on the ground, and they came through and said, by our standards, all these things are not valid.
When you come back and examine something, and you destroyed the original, you alter the chain of custody, you destroy the original, then you go back to check and verify it. You're checking the change.
You're checking the changed, and there's no evidence that it was changed.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, these people who did the changes, who had access to do the changes, were Republicans. and they're still incompetent. And so if you're so
No,
incompetent,
it's
Actually, I'm not.
anyone who worked.
I'm not saying it was an
access. Anyone who had access to that system.
Yeah.
Anyone that had access to that computer system could go.
And I'm also not. I'm also not saying it was done by people in house. I'm saying that we just saw this massive security breach, which, in my opinion, based on the information I read, how it was conducted, what systems were attacked, and how the whole thing was played out over the course of 6 months. That same guy that you said that was in charge of the data security and the integrity of data security for the election that was fired. It was happening for the previous 6 months on that guy's watch, and he didn't even know it. So that, to me, shoots holes in his credibility.
But that guy is not in charge of election security, right? Election security is
no, but he was the guy who came out, went on TV, and said this is the most secure election in American history. And if he worked for me and said that in earshot of one of my clients, I would have fired him too, because it is reckless and stupid. And that's because here's the facts. In my business, we are constantly behind the hackers. We're not in front of them ever. We learn what they're doing by having them fuck shit up first. Then we have to figure out how to plug the holes. So for him to say that as a professional, as a storied history, as a Microsoft security engineer, somebody with great respect and definitely with the talent, the tools, and the know-how, to say something like that blew my mind. I don't go to my clients and say, because they pay me a lot to keep their systems secure. I remind them regularly that that your systems are only as secure as the tools that we currently have to keep them that way. The bad guys are constantly a step ahead of us. The FBI reminds us. I actually regularly attend seminars and webinars by FBI cybersecurity experts that are telling us what we can expect. And they don't know when they're going to strike or how. Here, I'm going to give you a quick example because I don't want to derail this too much. But are you familiar with the term ransomware? Do you know what ransomware does? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you're also familiar with the term the dark web. Have you ever seen what that looks like, the dark web?
No, I've heard it. I don't know what that is exactly.
You use a specific type of browser to access it. It's kind of the internet's actually kind of 3 layers. It's a public layer. There's another layer where banking and government takes place, and then there's a place that is basically untracked. This is where, and you have to reach it by a browser called Tor, Tor. So it used to look a lot like the old Usenet message boards that we saw in the 90s. Just kind of a black screen with a bunch of text. I've got this driver's license for sale. I have guaranteed credit cards that I can sell you that haven't been discovered to have been stolen yet, blah, blah, blah. When you go there now, it has become a capitalist marketplace. It looks like Amazon almost. You have different groups of hackers, different groups of threat actors that have created logos for themselves, that have created taglines. So what ransomware does, for anybody who isn't aware, is that it is an encryption program that once they get it onto your computer, and I'm summarizing here, in essence, it encrypts your pictures, your documents, anything that's important to you. Your pictures of your kids growing up, your work documents, your tax information. It encrypts them with an algorithm so strong that basically the Pentagon would not be able to decrypt it. And the only way for you to get your stuff decrypted is to pay the pirates who did this to you for the decryption key. They started out in the beginning by putting a timer on the decryption key. It would actually expire after a couple of days. If you didn't pay them, you're never getting your stuff back. So they've gotten a hell of a lot more sophisticated in that now there's actually an app that you can download that helps you track as a hacker, all of the ransomware that you have distributed and how much money that you're earning from it. Then I started noticing the way that you'd find this out too, is that the hacker would leave a note on your desktop that says, we have encrypted all your files. If you want them back, come to this link and send us this much money in Bitcoin. Now they have translated these instructions into 27 different languages. Okay. They have also built these apps so they can track their progress and what they're doing. They have also now begun offering sale prices. If you buy the decryption key today, we'll knock 50% off of our price. If you wait 24 hours, we'll knock off 30%. After 48 hours, it will be 10%. After that, you're paying the full price. Then they started competing with each other. When you actually go onto the dark web and look at what they're selling a lot of the information. If they find their way into your computer, they actually go sell it. Here's a genuine, verified computer that here's access. You can even test it for 5 minutes before you pay for it to verify that it's authentic, blah, 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 blah. And they offer money back guarantees. Then they start sending out flyers. They don't just send out a little note for you on your desktop. Now it's actually a flyer. Encryption code. Yeah, wrap it up. I got it. Encryption code. We're going to charge you this much for this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Here's your own personalized portal that you log into and create an account to pay us. This is how sophisticated this stuff's got. Yeah, you're right. I was a little long-winded on this. The point being is this is the kind of stuff I deal with on a daily basis. So for me to go, you're actually able to get into government systems. Some of them very likely detailed the backdoors, the code, if you will, the source code for the voting software that runs on well-known, Diebold machines that are also well-known to be easily compromised. Why is it such a stretch for us to say, well, the Russians, would the Russians prefer a Trump or would they prefer a Biden? We could argue that all day, but if they've been meddling in our elections for 50 years, why wouldn't they meddle in this one? And how come this couldn't be the way they did it? That was my overall point that it took me 10 minutes to make.
Yeah. Well, why didn't Trump put it like that?
Because the guy he's about as able to articulate as an oven mitt. Yeah. That's why. Yeah. He can't say he doesn't know how to say any of that. He couldn't even read it to you.
These 70 million Americans that are trying to overthrow our democracy through violent insurrection are not. It's not the argument they're making. They're talking about suitcases and just.
Well, they were. Are they still?
They don't care. They just are mad that they lost. They don't need at this point.
Troy, are you mad that you lost, or are you more pissed off that people aren't paying attention to some of these genuine concerns? Which is it?
I'm pissed off that the data integrity group went through the data of several states and found votes being detracted from the vote totals throughout the night in a number of states. That's a problem. There should not be votes coming off the totals unless you can explain every single instance as to why. And these are batches. There's 12,300 coming off at a clip, or 3,000 here, 35.
They were actually all done in blocks too. I mean, it's really actually kind of see when you look at the way the data lays out that it's like, I mean, it's almost an exact. Actually, I think it was an exact flip. If there was 12,117 votes for Trump, 12,117 votes in this data stream are automatically just flipped to Biden. So, and again, was that a glitch in the code? Could have been. There's one thing I don't have is any what we call breadcrumbs. I don't see how people got into the system. I don't see that. In fact, the only evidence at all is the people who signed in and started using the machine, and you can see what they did and what they clicked on and what was open. There's a log of that stuff. You can see that. So, my question is that why aren't people concerned about this? Well, I think the 10 years of manipulation by media, by bullshit politicians on both teams, have divided us to the point where on something like this, we're not going to listen to the other team anymore. We just simply, and actually, I think, David, you've done a great job of illustrating that point, of saying that these people are, they're off the, they're chasing this bullshit, then they're creating the insurrection. But what's funny is that if you came to me, if I was sitting on the other side of the table, I'd go, wow, that's shit, dude. Is that really what you saw? Is that really what's happening out there? I'd give you some credit for being a reasonable person is my point. But we're not doing that. So what do you think the end result of that is going to be? People burning down the freaking Capitol building.
No, that's not why people are burning down. And so Tim had a question a minute ago about what did he say that incited it to violence? So I posted something in the group, and the word demagogue came to me, and I actually stuck it in my browser and looked it up on Wiki, and I'm like, boy, Trump hits all of these pieces.
I'm sorry, but I have to agree. Demagoguery is what he does.
It's what he does, and he does it well. He does it well. And so, Trump's not a fool. He's cunning. He's not a fool. He's got lawyers.
He's slick.
Yeah, he's not going to go out there and say, go burn things up. He has whipped up people into a froth and a frenzy intentionally, because that's what politicians do. You create passion, support in your leadership. I mean, this is a guy who, in his first time around, when people go out in public, if you didn't look right, you got beat up at his rally just because people presumed how you felt and whether you supported him or not by the way you looked. That's the kind of passion that he exhorted in his tribe. And so this guy has been talking about.
You're stacking up too many things for me to refute, because, for one thing, we know there were paid agitators at the Trump rallies in 2016. We know that. It wasn't a whole bunch of rowdy people who were there to see Trump. It was a bunch of there was paid people. It's on freaking video. Don't come on me. It's on video that they paid disruptors to come start fights at these rallies.
We know the old man slugged the black kid and came back and apologized to him. We saw that. We saw Trump ordered a black Florida elected Republican official off stage, right? Because he just couldn't imagine that this dude was one of his supporters. We saw just the other day in LA a sister get beat up and pepper sprayed by just a group of Trump supporters on the street just as she was trying to walk home.
Just like, we saw in Portland, a guy wearing a MAGA hat walking down the street was hunted down and murdered for wearing his MAGA hat, for being there to support Trump. And see, this is where this shit starts breaking down.
People walking out of Minneapolis getting their hats and T-shirts and stuff tore off of them and put in a bonfire.
This is where this stuff breaks down.
Let me make this point. And so when this happens inside a political rally, an event where the presidential candidate is saying, beat them up, it's a whole different thing.
And I can't disagree.
Than when it's a group of people on the street unbidden. But
so let's take those things for what they are at a time, rather than see. This is the problem. Again, you have pointed out that people are kind of predisposed based on the way they see the way they feel about something to react to it the way they do. Right? You just kind of said that a minute ago. That being the case, bringing up, hey, look, this is the violence that I'm talking about that is committed over here and over here. It's not a whataboutism. This isn't a straw man. This is a, wow, what a mess. And for whatever reason, though, there is this natural inclination to push back, to say, oh, yeah. And that is what I keep talking about is the big problem here. And that also can be used by power, and power is using it right now to do something that I think what we're going to see coming here is, I just heard today that power on the left is, some of them began referring to, and I wish I could remember who was off the top of my head, to this event as something very much like 9/11. And I went, that's going to be a great jumping off point to create very draconian legislation, just like they did at 9/11, called the Patriot Act. And it is coming. Yeah. And so why would they want to stop us from going, oh, yeah? Why would they want to, for us to go, hey, Trump did do these things at these rallies. He did say these things as a president of the United States, which are so beyond reckless that he should be taken to task for it without a doubt, without going, oh, yeah, well, Biden, oh, yeah, Obama. How come we go, yeah, you're right. That is something that he needs to be taken down for, taken apart for. I remember my response to Obama when he was talking about, he did bring up police violence, and then we had a black man. How many how many cops did that black man in Dallas shoot?
It was like 5 cops.
I think it was 5 or 6 cops that were killed. Yeah. Why can't we equally apply the principles that we agree on? You and I, all three of us right here, agree on these principles. This shit is fucked up. It is wrong. How come we can't apply them without going, well, this one's worse? Now, to your point earlier, and I don't want to gloss over this, the Capitol thing really does stand on its own. It really does need to be looked at on its own. And again, I am still assigning responsibility to the president. And I'm assigning it to him because he's the guy in charge, and he knew better than to use inflammatory rhetoric when he's talking to people of all different persuasions and levels of intelligence, frankly. You know what I mean?
But he should have known better. But it's his stock in trade, and it's why he got elected. He's just doing what he'd always done. It's not a surprise. Now he's reckless. He knew he was whipping up passions in his people, and that's why people love him so much, right? And so, but I just think he just got away from him. It's all fun and games until you breach the Capitol building, right? And as we're starting to look and find out and hear more about this, the more sinister some of the individual actors that are in that have been involved with. I mean, the pipe bombs and, the dude they arrested with the truck full of melted styrofoam and gas, and the things you read on the internet about these plans to execute Prince. And so the level of plottery that's been discovered is shocking. And maybe the most shocking thing of all, and this is at the end of the day, this is why Trump's got to go. On his watch, the Capitol got breached. And whatever led up to it, whoever's fault, blame, however you want to sign that, the fact of the matter is, on his watch, the Capitol got breached. And if some of these things are true about, the guy, Steve Sund, went to the Senate and House security officials to get the National Guard on standby, and they turned them down because they did the optics of that. I mean, this is really sinister stuff. And that sounds plausible to me, because who wants to piss off Trump by having the National Guard on standby? I mean, this sounds plausible. So, but any way you slice it, this happened on Trump's watch. This has never happened before. And so that, the leader has to take the hit. He's got to go.
So we just got this message here. Who are you to tell us who is a patriot and who is not? Oh, sorry, I forgot you're live streaming from your tank in Afghanistan. Shake my head. I'm not quite sure I understand what that means, and I'm not sure I'm saying anybody isn't a patriot. Have either one of you guys...
I don't remember.
I am simply saying that that people in public places, especially as high as the president, have a responsibility to make sure that all of us are listened to, heard, taken care of, etc., to whatever degree that's possible. But I'm not saying who is a patriot and who isn't. In fact, that was actually, maybe if I'm reading this right, this is what I was saying, is to say, you and Troy have a very specific disagreement in terms of what it is that he saw regarding problems. Let's just call it problems. Fraud, misdeeds, whatever, problems with our system of elections. You're saying that it didn't happen. And I'm saying, well, how do you quantify that with a guy who was obviously not stupid, that did his work, read these briefs, has an understanding of what happened? His opinion should not simply be invalidated as if he is not I don't know if that's what you're talking about here. But that's what I'm talking about. Like, for example, David, you opened up a whole world to me that I used to push back on pretty regularly because I didn't understand it. So this is what I mean. So where I draw the line is people who actually go and blow shit up, which is something that we're going to have to get to in a different conversation, because I've been pondering a great deal what you said about how violence tends to create social change, and I have a bunch of different things that I'd like to go over with you on that. I want to keep it short tonight. We actually ended up not even getting to all the stuff that we had meant to talk about, but at the same time, this was a good discussion. I'm really still, my mission statement is the same. I'm willing to listen to everything. I might not agree with it all, but what I'm trying to do is get people talking. So I don't know, seriously, Motez Hayek? I hope I'm saying it right. I don't know exactly what you're talking about, but I'm certainly not saying that somebody's a patriot and somebody isn't. I'm saying that people who say that kind of stuff, I don't understand it. For example, David, you say some pretty inflammatory shit about burning the system down, and but at the same time, I don't think you have a particular anti-patriotic stance, if you will. At least being able to say that this person's a patriot and that's not. I'm not sure I've ever heard you say anything like that.
I'm a patriot.
Burn it down. Well, you know what? Isn't that what it is that we're arguing that some of the folks on the right who believe that the election was fraudulent are saying? Is that I'm a patriot, burn this shit down. Yeah. It is no longer serving the people. Isn't that what you say regularly, David?
Yeah,
so how different are you from somebody like Troy who is saying the same damn thing? That's my point. It seems to me, the more I talk to people, the more I find out we're all talking about the same shit.
Yeah.
We really are. We've been screwed by power. But what I find really funny is the people who want to give power more power because we've been screwed by power. Huh? That doesn't make a great deal of sense at all.
Yeah, but here's the thing with the demagogues, right? So demagogues are the weakness of a democracy. You get these demagogues that come along, and the normal rule they exploit the normal rules of democracy, and so the kind of theoretical and elegant answers don't work with them. This is the point where you've got to do something different, and so that's why I look at this and I go, all this anti-democratic things that are happening have been made, and I'll say necessary, by the actions of the demagogue, because he is a threat. I mean, he tried to steal the election. And so whether you agree, so let me unpack that a little bit. Whether you think that there are problems with the election or not, certainly the way not to handle that is to go into Congress and try and stop it, through
is that what they were trying to do?
Non-judicial. That's what they said they were trying to do. If you listen to, as more things come out, and you hear about what the people were saying, they were there to keep Trump in power. That's what. I can't say all of them, but there was a certain. If you listen to what the cops are saying, what they heard, if you listen to people who were in the crowd, the people were there.
All right, yeah, I get it.
In power.
Well, let me ask you this, Troy, because you are passionate about this. You've done a lot of work on this. Like I said, you've read the legal briefs. What would you do? Would you have gone and breached the Capitol? I mean, would that be something that you would have supported, or what? Let me ask you this: with everything what kind of an outcome are you looking for? What would you change? I mean, we're pretty deep into it. Biden's going to be president here. He's going to take power in a few days. How would you handle this?
Right. Well, definitely storming the Capitol is not one of the things I would have put on my list. I mean, I actually thought about going to Washington. I wasn't going to go unless I knew somebody who was going, which is actually there was a possibility, and I probably could have dug someone up. I just wasn't hot for it. But while this started. And I don't have accurate numbers on how many was there at the speech in the I forget what that area is called, away from the Capitol. But stuff started going on while that was still going on.
While his speech was still being
speech was going on. Yeah. So I mean, I have a state senator that's kind of in hot water right now just because he sponsored a bus trip down there, and suddenly now you're attached to these people who rushed in the Capitol, and it's like, well, I think I could easily say like 90% of the people that went there were not there for that.
Mm-hmm.
They're not there for to cause problems for bad optics. Probably higher than that. I don't know how many troublemakers there were there, but. What would I do? What would I do? Well, it's too late now.
Well, let's say it wasn't. What would you have done? I mean, would you have gone and armed yourself and I mean, to a degree, and this is something Brent was trying to say the other night. This is something that Dustin said, is that when you put yourself into a person's shoes that has that mindset, of course, that would make sense if you had that mindset. It's pretty clear that I don't. So I'm asking you, what would you, I mean, moving forward, if you had a big enough voice, a big enough platform, what would you be doing with it? To make this change. You believe that these events took place, that this election was stolen, and based on what it is that I find you to be a reasonable person, so I'm not going to simply dismiss that offhand. I'm not partisan, so this doesn't have anything to do with Democrat, Republican, Trump supporter, Biden. I don't care. It has to do with whether or not I find you to be reasonable and credible. You did work that I didn't do. You know a few things that I don't. That being said, what would you do? How do we proceed? If I ask David, I know what kind of answers I'm going to get. Because he's very clear on what it is that he thinks there are the right ways to handle this kind of thing in terms of injustice. David is what I'm talking about.
Well, that's a good question, but that's why I think that's why what did happen is because. there doesn't seem to be a way forward. If you can't ensure the integrity of your elections, if you're on the downtrodden side, there's nothing you can do about it.
And again, I find that, based on my discussions with David regarding racial justice and the history of racial injustice in this country, I see that your arguments are similar. I mean, they might be for different reasons,
yep.
But at the same time, you're talking about injustice for people who have been marginalized, essentially, at least in this particular respect. So again, what I'm watching is power capitalizing on this and going, let's make sure we keep people divided. Let's talk about how 70 million people are now the same as Nazis. And I've seen this, and aren't we smart enough as Americans to go, wait a minute, man, there's something that's not right here?
See, that's just politics, right? So it's not new. I mean, they were having these violent disagreements back before the founding, right?
Agreed.
And so, in every society,
which is why there was a founding.
Every society is like, those people over there are evil. This is not particular to us, but I think these social media tools have made the ability to transmit this information more rapidly and more irresponsibly. And so when we come into, Parler getting cut off and Stop the Steal being banned on Facebook, and the inability of kind of these citizen journalism and democratizing ways of media getting cut off, that's responsive demagogue. And so I think it's responsible for some brief period of time to do that, to allow the temperature to come down. And I think that's right. But generally, I'm opposed to that. I'm opposed to, limiting the ability of people to use their tool of choice, because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's 70 million people are going to go set up shop on a different platform, and we're going to be further divided. And this is going to get worse, and the national security state is going to get more onerous. And I'm listening to people, wild-eyed, which some people might think wild-eyed black progressives are going, wait, getting shut down. Is Trump's Twitter account getting shut down? Is that a good thing? Because that's going to get applied to us.
No, it's not a good thing.
They're going to take those same rules and apply it against us at some time in the future.
That's
now, right. but I would say right now, Trump's Twitter getting shut off is required, because his track record shows that he's going to go out there and say something crazy.
Well, let's say he does.
Wait.
Okay,
he
go ahead.
Came out. Everybody was after Trump, and reasonably so, to make a statement, calm these people down. He does, and Twitter takes it down, and Facebook takes it down. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say
that's a fair point.
You can't give the guy hell for his rhetoric, and then cut him off from stepping in and trying to better the situation.
Sure, I can. That's exactly what I'm advocating. So he got a chance to go in and say his calming statement. Now I'm pulling the plug before he do something stupid and he changes his mind.
That's not what Troy is saying, that you pull the plug on him and then he can't make his calming statement.
But he said something. He put something out the next day and said, I'm against the violence. And, he said, how did he say that thing? There was a statement on Twitter that he put out the next day.
Well, then let's rewind just very quickly to what Tim was asking earlier. I saw it here.
Yeah.
Where is it? Here we go. Every patient who comes in and says Trump incited the Capitol violence, I asked him very specifically, what did he say in that speech that incited the violence?
Yeah, this is what I'm saying.
And there wasn't anything.
There wasn't anything in the speech. I actually checked it. I read the transcript. Actually, what he said specifically is we are now going to go over to the Capitol peacefully, quietly, to let them know how we feel. That's what he said. Hey, there wasn't a qualifier. There was no qualifier.
And what he said was, I'll be there with you. Was he?
Okay.
Ooh, he did not go there to keep the crowd calm. So clearly that crowd went down to the Capitol and breached the building. Right after
the crowd was 100,000 people. How many people breached the building?
Somebody went down there and breached. So somebody went and breached the building.
I'm guessing that the people who did, and this is pure speculation, okay?
Yeah.
Had decided they were going to do that before they even got to Washington.
That's probably true, right? And who brought them to Washington? Who invited them to come to Washington that particular date?
Trump did, of course.
Yeah,
and so did Pence.
And who fired him up and told him that their election was stolen?
No, and again, I earlier I
Right.
said he is
Right.
responsible ultimately. That's what I
Yeah.
said. What I'm
And
saying
so-
is that
yeah.
there is nothing in his speech that day that said go do this. But again, you're not taking into account something very important. And that is like with a platform, even like this, there's only, there's 10 people who watch these videos as we're hanging out and chatting and stuff, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, I think we're all responsible enough to know where we should draw a line because we can't. We all know people who are dumb enough to go do shit like that, don't we? We've all associated in our lives with people where you kind of go, I'm going to be careful what I'm going to say around this guy because he might go blow up something or rob a liquor store. Am I wrong? So that is what I'm talking about is when you have a megaphone that big with that much power, you need to be careful. I have said this before that here's a great question. I think I love asking Republicans this in particular. Would Reagan have handled it this way? Would he have actually gone out and said your election's been stolen from you, and and I'm going to concede, but it's all bullshit anyway? Would he have done that? Hell no, because he understood what it meant to hold that particular megaphone. You can agree or disagree with his politics, but he handled them with class and dignity. This guy didn't. Now, I understand we live in different times, but I also go, okay, if we pulled Reagan into this time, he could still be a tough guy and a badass without being a dick. You know what I mean?
Well, he'd be a left wing commie by the current Republican.
By current Republican standards.
but this is exactly why the establishment and why so many regular people found and find Trump so revolting the first time.
Well,
this is part of the definition of a demagogue. He breached these normal standards of behavior. People understood that he did things in a different way than anybody else did, but yet that was part of his appeal to his base, is that he didn't care about these standards of decency. So I'll let you get in, but I want to say this one thing. So I've been thinking about this about Trump for a long time. In maritime law and maritime culture, there's such a thing as you're responsible for your wake. If your boat might not hit anything, but if your wake causes any damage, you are responsible. So how did Trump incite the violence? What did he say? It was his wake.
And again, you don't see me disagreeing. I was talking about the very specific instance. Did this man call for insurrection? Is what that question was essentially about. No, he didn't. Of course he didn't. He didn't say anything about it. But was he reckless? Was he reckless with his rhetoric? Absolutely. Was it? This is something I think I said the other night, is that Trump is also the commander-in-chief of the military. If non-civilian military member conducted themselves this way, they would be court-martialed for conduct unbecoming at the very least, right? So this is what we've got to agree on. When I said the other night, Americans, you are responsible for this mess, it's because for whatever reason, we're willing to tolerate this from any of them. From any of them. I don't care what side of the... right now we have one of the most interesting and powerful corporate-backed administrations coming to power. I mean, the list of corporate donors is absolutely astonishing. I posted one today. Did you see it, Troy? How much Apple and Google and Alphabet, Facebook, YouTube, etc. had contributed to Biden. Right next to it was the column. Trump got like $19,000 from it wasn't Google. I'll pull it up here in a minute. In any case, but it was $1.9 million from the same person, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Trump didn't get anywhere near that much money, but they kept calling, he's corporate backed. Of course they all are. But what we're seeing is these same people who stand to gain by their tech monopoly, essentially, are the people that are, here, we're gonna team up with this particular administration. Can we expect any sort of fairness out of it in this case? I don't know. I want to know what it is that their money bought them. But let's get close to wrapping it up here. I want to refer, because it's something you said, David. This is really important. This is, again, I'm referring to Matt Taibbi's article from today that says that we need a new media system. And if you tuned in late, Matt is actually one of my favorite journalists, because he has a sense of journalistic integrity. He is not a Trump fan at all. In fact, he came from Rolling Stone, which is decidedly not quite right-wing, are they? The flaw in the system that even the biggest news companies now operate under the assumption that at least half of their potential audience isn't listening. This leads to all sorts of problems, and the fact that the easiest way to keep your own demographic is to feed it negative stories about others is only the most obvious. On all sides, we now lean into inflammatory caricatures because financial incentives encourage it. Everyone monetized Trump. The Fox wing surrendered to the Trump phenomenon from the start, abandoning its supposed fealty to family values from the Megyn Kelly incident on. Without a thought, Rupert Murdoch sacrificed the paper-thin veneer of pseudo-respectability that Fox had always maintained up to a point, that being the moment advertisers started to bail in horror as they did with Glenn Beck. He reinvented Fox as a platform for Trump's conspiratorial brand of cartoon populism, rather than let some more Fox than Fox imitator like OAN sell the ad to Trump's voters for 4 years. In between its titillating quasi-porn headlines, lesbian prison gangs waiting to get hands on Lindsay Lohan, inmate says, is one from years ago that stuck in my mind. Fox's business model has long been based on scaring the crap out of aging, silent majority viewers with a parade of anything but the truth explanations for America's decline. It villainized immigrants, Muslims, and the new Black Panthers, environmentalists, anyone but ADM, Walmart, Countrywide, JP Morgan Chase, and other sponsors of Fortress America. Donald Trump was one of the people who got hooked on Fox's narrative. So the rival media ecosystem chose cash over truth also. It could have responded to the last election by looking even harder at the tensions that they didn't see coming in Trump's America, which might have meant more intense examination of the problems that gave Trump his opening, the jobs that never came back over bankers and retailers decided to move them to unfree labor zones in places like China, the severe debt and addiction crises, the ridiculous contradiction of an expanding international military garrison manned by a population of fast-losing belief in the mission, etc. Instead, outlets like CNN and MSNBC took a Fox-like approach, downplaying issues in favor of shoving Trump's agitating personality in the faces of audiences over and over to the point where many people could no longer think about anything else. To juice the ratings, the Trump story, which did not need the slightest exaggeration to be fantastic, was more or less constantly distorted. Trump then began to be described as a cause of America's problems rather than a symptom. And his followers, every last one, were demonized right along with him in caricatures that tickled the urbane audiences of channels like CNN, but made conservatives want to reach for something sharp. This technique was borrowed from Fox, which learned in the Bush years that you could boost ratings by selling audiences on the idea that their liberal neighbors were terrorist traitors. Such messaging worked far better than bashing Al Qaeda, because this enemy was closer, making the hate more real. This is what I have been describing to everyone now for many years, and they don't want to listen to. Oh, you're saying that both sides are the same. I've never said both sides are the same. What both sides do differently is they just come up with a different way of screwing you over and ripping you off. No, they're not the same, because that's what distinguishes them as far as I'm concerned. In any case, so David, you were describing how power's going to capitalize on this. Of course power's going to capitalize on this. We know that, right? When you have, what I think is really funny about this is we hear very often from the right that the news media are complicit. Well, yes, they are. For both teams. That's what I've been saying. Yes, they have made billions off of Trump. Trump, 4 years, has boosted their ratings. Personally, I'm thinking, wow, if I were all of you, I would have hoped he got reelected, because your money is going to stop flowing as soon as the guy, this incoming administration takes over and shit goes. We're gonna govern like it's 1999 comes back. So in any case, I read all of that because I wanted to sign off on that. Basically, to me, it kind of encapsulates all the stuff we've been talking about, the way power approaches it and the way the media exaggerates it and then feeds it. It is a never-ending cycle. And what David, you said earlier, it's coming. The draconian measures that were taken after 9/11. We could probably expect something similar. I actually forecasted a couple of days ago on Skeptic Tank that it's going to be in the form of laws that find a way to skirt our First Amendment in order to limit speech, in order to limit freedom of the press, in order to limit religious expression. They're going to find a way with clever legalese to figure out, well, we need to put together a commission that will interpret the First Amendment based on these events. That's what I see coming. It will be the left's version of what it is that the right did with the Patriot Act, if you will.
They're gonna pay for not letting Colin Kaepernick kneel.
Man, I really wanted to take you to town for that stupid meme you posted. These are the same people that think this is bad. Oh, my God. You know better than that, and I know you know better than
it's
that.
It's fun.
You talked about Parler earlier, and there was a little bit of information I wanted to toss in there.
Okay.
The thing about Parler is well, they got a rush. An influx. I was there in the first wave. I think back in May, June, and I signed up, and of course it worked like crap.
It didn't look like it was very well put together. It looked like a pretty lousy
it was a work in progress. I mean, and the servers were slow and all that stuff. But when they were given the ultimatum, when Parler was given the ultimatum. What the ultimatum they were given was to be like Twitter and to be like Facebook and to enforce the terms of service through algorithmic scanning, which is not their policy at all. If they get a heads up about it, they get a complaint about the terms of service, they go and do it manually. They are they're very much against for privacy issues going in and scanning every single post. So I mean, there's a completely different approach to how they're doing things. Where Amazon laid down a gauntlet and said, "Do this or else," and it's like, well, we're not you guys. We don't operate the way you do.
Well, so, like I said earlier too, is that I'm familiar with some of these things. Is as far as leasing servers and space and platforms from software as a service or a platform as a service from Amazon, and they do kind of reserve the right to just pull the plug on you, but their language is more along the lines of here's some things that you need to know and here's how we'll handle them. So honestly, I think that there's a couple of different ways we can interpret this event. They caved to pressure, or this was their whole idea in the first place, or they're actually David the other night was talking about how corporations co-opt wokeness and then turn it into money for themselves. This might be another one of those kind of instances. I really don't know, but what I do know is that the idea that we're going to push you all off of this platform because we don't like what you're saying seems to be the veneer anyway. That's the conversation, and there are people right now that I see all over Facebook cheering for this idea. I've seen people say the next thing we need to do is get rid of Fox News. And I'm going, do you realize, none of you actually have any idea how that'll play out, do you? Yeah, you really don't know that they will come for you at some point or another. David, you pointed that out earlier. This is not a solution. In fact, what ends up happening when you pull people's mouthpieces is that then they go gather in dark corners and their numbers grow.
Yep.
And then in order to get attention, because they can't get it through normal channels, they do insane shit. So this is what we have to look forward to. And will power take responsibility for creating a situation like that? God, no. There's no way that anybody's going to come out and say, "Wow, we screwed that up. Here's your rights back."
I'll give you two things. So I think all of those things, and I think all of those reasons are likely contributing factors.
Agreed.
And I would say because of the unique, dangerous time we're in, it was probably responsible just to let the temperature come down. And I think one thing that we haven't considered or haven't brought out here is we talked about it from a domestic perspective. Let's look at it from an international perspective. We are still, for some limited amount of time, the financial center of the world.
Yep.
The whole world is invested in our democracy, propping up, and these companies continue to operate. You don't know Saudis, what, Europe, the military apparatus, the U.S. state security apparatus. You don't know who might have come to Amazon and said, you know what, pull the plug now, either from a national security perspective or just from the financiers of the world. Just don't know.
Fair point. My response.
Well, I would hope it is not anyone in the U.S. government that went and said pull the plug, because that would be a constitutional violation, because a third party becomes a government actor when they act on behalf of the government.
Well, so if the FBI came and said, there's plotters on Parler, and here's what it is, and we need you to shut it down so this plot doesn't advance.
Why would you want to do that?
Statement?
Yeah,
wouldn't it be better to be able to watch what they're doing?
Well, I think if they would have, they've already kind of got on their way to get them, right? And so we know that the government's really good at following plotters and rounding them up and catching them. And so I think that's possible. Just, and the things I've read in the press about some of the things that have been said on Parler, and a lot of it's just probably blowhardism. Just like the people who breached the Capitol, they got in there, and most of them are like, well, what do I do now? But apparently there was some.
Like I said, they were taking selfies and shit. It was like, wow, yeah, there's the revolutionary right there.
Yeah,
this is a new way.
I think there's a lot of big talk, but given what happened, you cannot ignore like this big talk. Like, sadly, the woman got killed. Just nobody can cheer about somebody losing their life in the Capitol building. She said some outrageous things. And so I think, though, and it's just so sad.
Okay, so at what point do we shut Twitter down? At what point is it justified to shut Twitter down? Because all Parler is Twitter in different clothes. At what point is it justified to shut Facebook down? There's no end to it. This is bullshit. This is fucking bullshit.
Love it when you're fired.
They say, well, if this is a private company, so this private company.
So they started a private company.
So go start your own platform. Well, you're not allowed to have your own platform because we own the backbone of the internet too.
Yeah. That is actually fascism. That is actually we talked about this the other night on the stream. What really is fascism is that kind of marriage of government and corporate power that is capable of controlling things, not only like free speech, but markets and the other things that we see corporate power controlling with the government's blessing. So I agree with you completely. That point you just made about, we heard this a lot when we had hearings, where Ted Cruz was just grilling the hell out of Jack Dorsey. And Jack had no answers. He looked like he'd shit his pants and, kind of was dying to get out of his messy drawers, And people kept saying, oh, but my private business. And I'm going, you don't really understand this, do you? Go make your own platform. And you're right. So they did. And then it was demonized and vilified. Then it's a conservatives platform. It's a platform for the far right. And it's not. It's a platform that welcomes everybody. So instead, much like, you remember how the Tea Party was reacted to? They made it about racism so that they could destroy the Tea Party. The Tea Party had nothing to do with racism.
You got to get out of this theoretical thing. Yes, it was a party that was made for everybody, but there's a reason Troy was on it and I'm not. A certain group of people gravitated to it and marketed, to themselves.
Yes, the ones who were being marginalized in the monopolized versions. The 7 out of 10 Facebook Americans that use Facebook and the
he's got a point.
Percentages on Twitter.
Yeah. Yeah, and so you screwed it up for yourself. So Newton told us for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. If you breach the Capitol, Parler gets shut down. And so either
no. But Parler started way before that.
I was going to say, actually, I think Mussolini taught us that one. But okay.
So, if you come for the king, you best not miss. Y'all was in there. You had a chance to burn it down. You didn't do it. Suffer the consequences. If you go for a coup and you lose, the failed insurrectionists always get hung.
I'm not sure that, again, I don't agree with your characterization of it, man. There was no coup here. Here's a coup, okay?
No, they played like they acted like they
Can we agree that a coup is actually co-opting military power to unseat someone in power or to hold power? That's essentially what a coup is, right?
Not necessarily. Well, I mean, however you want to put it. I mean, if they were there, the way that they were talking, this is the rhetoric. The rhetoric was, "We're here to free whatever." They wanted to overturn the election results, right? That was the genesis of the whole reason that people were doing all this big talk. There was all this big talk, but they weren't really committed to do what it is that they were talking about doing, and it just went a little bit too far. And and the thing is, though, but actions have consequences. And if you make a threat to the state, and the Congress people were frightened. You had with Deborah, that woman who is tweeting the people in the building, "Here's where Nancy Pelosi is." You have a delay in the National Guard getting there.
That's something we didn't even approach. I do want to say, for the record, that the National Guard was not invited. The military. I actually have an article from the Military Times who say they weren't there because they were told not to be there. They actually weren't invited to be there, to be clear. There's also another article from Forbes saying that it was pretty clear that Trump himself, not just the administration, not one of his mouthpieces, didn't want him there. So, and it was ultimately Pence who asked them when they finally did show up. It was Pence that ordered that they come. So that these things are important. They're important that we're at least honest about these things, regardless of whether or not you supported Trump or you believe that there was a problem with the election or you don't. We still have to look at who's responsible for this stuff. And we have an incoming administration that is going to do very similar things in different ways for different reasons. And we have to be just as willing to hold them to account for it too. I've said this many, many times. You want power to shit their pants? Let's all start talking amongst ourselves instead of pushing back against one another. They'll know the jig is up. It's over as soon as we unite. And I'm not talking about small groups of people, the communists, the socialists, the Black Lives Matter folks, the Antifa people, the right-wingers, left-wingers. I'm talking about everybody. Because the fact of the matter is, and this is a fact, is that not one of those groups is going to get everything that they want. It never has happened like that, and it never will. So the fact is that, and I said this the other night, the only way change takes place is after violence and bloodshed. Can't we just actually kind of preempt that? Let's stop listening to these shitheads and start listening to each other instead. I'm gonna let y'all go with that. It's dinner time. Troy, I appreciate your passion. I appreciate your commitment to what you believe just as much as I appreciate yours, David, how much you are committed to what it is that you believe, and you're both open enough to push each other around in order to make sure that it is heard and shared. This is important. At the same time, it's been done with respect, which means that I've got respect for you both. Thanks for being here. Thanks for everybody in the chat. If we got something wrong, if I blathered on too long, David's sitting here going, "Wrap it up, man." Dude, you're talking too long on this one thing. Keep pointing it out and maybe I'll get better at it. In any case, we appreciate you being here. If I got anything wrong, mischaracterized something, reported incorrect information, let me know. I'd much, much rather be wrong and learn something from it than be wrong and insist that I'm right and sound like a jackass. Be well, everybody.